Hello and welcome back to another torch review. I have the ThorFire TG06S flashlight or torch in for testing, and this was sent via ThorFire. So we'll open up the box and show you what you get included, apart from the torch obviously, which we will take a look at in a second. You have a couple of spare O-rings, and we also got the user manual, which we'll have a look at now. Now when you're looking at the manual, you'll notice on the technical parameters section that there are 4 power levels. You also have a strobe mode, but take note of the fact that depending on if you're using an AA, a 1.5 volt battery, or a lithium 14500, the power output varies across the whole range depending on which cell you're using. So we'll test that out a bit later on and see how that stacks up. Other section is really just basic care and maintenance, but it covers the basics well enough. Looking at the torch, this has quite a lot of knurling on the body design. You'll also see there's flat edges near the head section, so that should prevent rolling, and you have a reversible clip too, stainless steel clip. The build on this feels pretty good. The base switch or tail switch is silicone. It has a bit of a softer feel than most of the switches that I've used. Now I noted with the clip it's pretty hard to remove this, so it's never going to come off by accident, so I eventually had to use a cable and pull it off, and then you can move it to the second position at the top. So this could be handy if you have it on a cap, say you want to put the light on there just to project it forward. It's also fairly light, so it would work quite well for that. Pretty tough to remove though, perhaps better than being too easy. Taking off the base cap now, you can see the switch mechanism, and there is a spring. Aluminium feels quite thick, decent quality on this. You've got square cut threads too, and we'll take the head section off too. Be able to see the contact points there. Overall quality on the machining is decent for the price. This is a super budget torch, so it's as good as I would expect or hope for the price. Now you have a choice of power sources for this. You see the Eneloop cell and the 14500. We'll test these just to see. You can see there's a decent amount of space there just with the Eneloop nickel metal hydride. Some of these torches can be a bit tight with the 14500 cells. This is a protected Olight one that I have here. They are definitely longer than the standard AAs. You can use the alkalines if you want, but there's no problems at all. Plenty of space even for the protected cell. We're using a Cree XP-G2 RS, bit of a mouthful, and a smooth reflector. It's actually quite deep for a compact torch. And looking at the size, about 9.5 centimeters in length. What I'm doing is comparing it to the Olight S1A Baton. That's because both torches use the same power source, either the lithium or the AA. So you can see it's a fair bit longer than the Olight. And the reflector design is completely different. The Olight has a special lens on the top, and the ThorFire has a traditional reflector. They are completely different prices though, so bear that in mind too. Operation on this, there's no momentary on with the ThorFire, it's just on or off, and you just half press to cycle through the power modes. It always starts off in the high mode, doesn't have a memory, and you can double click to enter into the strobe mode. Pretty straightforward and simple, works okay. I prefer it to come on in a low mode. One thing I did note is that the switch at the bottom, silicone, when it's on, does protrude slightly, so if you're on an uneven surface it might not base or tail stand perfectly well. Quick waterproof test that I always do, and I've never had any problems to date, but I leave them in here for about half an hour, so no issues at all with the water resistance. Now Moonlight mode, this is using the AAs on the ThorFire. You can see this is fairly bright for a Moonlight mode, and onto the lithium ion, brighter again. So I would definitely say the specs off on that. We're probably looking at around about 5 or 6 lumens, perhaps slightly more with the lithium. If you compare it to the S1A, which has around about half a lumen, that is a genuine Moonlight mode. With the beam shot now, just to show, you can see you get a hot spot in the middle. It's more concentrated, which is in line with the reflector. And a test outside, we're on nickel metal hydride. I have to run separate tests now because the power output varies, and we're starting high and dropping down. Although it doesn't look super bright, the power output's not bad for a single cell AA torch. Now if you're noticing there's some slight flickering, we'll come on to that later on. We're on the lithium ion. Quite a nice bump up in power. You can see there's a concentration in the middle the brightness is higher in the central area. That's due to the reflector design. And then stepping down. Now I've put it next to the Olight, also using the lithium ion cell, the S1A, and we're going up the power settings because that's how the torch works. And then up to the top setting. Top setting is only available with the lithium ion on the Olight, but they're always the same. If you want to see the maximum output on nickel metal hydride, you just go down to the previous brightness setting on that. This is the wide angle test that I do, nickel metal hydride. And then moving down through the power settings, the flickering is PWM, it's pulse wave modulation. It's what they use to control the power output on the torch. They're not using the current regulation, they're using PWM. I can't see it with my eyes, I will say that, but the camera is picking it up. So that's something to consider if you're using a torch here. We're on the lithium ion now. You can see quite a decent power output for this, but there is that slight flickering on the lines. If you're recording video and you're using this torch, it's going to show up in all the modes except the high mode for the AAs. So that's just something to bear in mind if you use a torch for that activity. Now we're on to the S1A. We're going to go up through the power levels. It's not unusual, I would add, to say with the PWM, it's a bit like watching a TV. So if you watch a TV normally, but if you take a recording of it, you'll see the lines going down. It's only really an issue when you can see it with your eyes, and I can't see it with my eyes, but it does have to be noted for the review. You can see on the maximum brightness level, the Olight is pretty impressive. It's definitely brighter than the ThorFire, even though the beam is more spread out. Now I'm switching between the two. You can see the ThorFire firstly, and then on to the Olight. So different beam patterns from these torches. You have a more concentrated one in the middle with the ThorFire, and a more spread out and diffused beam with the Olight torch. On to the telephoto test. ThorFire does quite well on this. There's still quite a decent amount of power from the torch, but it just concentrates it more in the middle. It's more common to have a spread out beam like the Olight has here. See, it covers the full frame much more evenly than the ThorFire, but you have to bear in mind that the price points on these torches is completely different, and a close-up beam shot on the ThorFire. At closer distances it seems to spread out a bit more than at further distances at the highest power level, so perhaps not really a problem. I probably would have gone with a textured reflector on the ThorFire, but that's a small point to make. And just looking at the house shot here, plenty of power really, even though I'd say it's probably around about 400 lumens on the maximum rating. And for distances it does have a bit of range too. You can see the building in the distance there, quite some way away, and it does a reasonable job of helping illuminate that. Summarising the review with a few thoughts on the TG06S, I'll start with the potential negatives. Firstly, the Moonlight modes weren't as low as indicated, and the highest output also wasn't quite as high as I expected. It's probably around about 350 to 400 lumens with the lithium ion cell, saying that the power output's still perfectly decent for a single cell AA torch. And you have that PWM, which isn't visible to your eyes, or at least it wasn't to me, but it does show up on video capture, so do bear that in mind. Looking at the positives, bargain price, this is around about £13 or €15, and you get a fairly decent torch for that. The build quality is quite good, and you have a choice of 2 power sources and a reversible clip. They're certainly not a bad torch in most respects. Hopefully you found that of some use. Don't forget to check out my other torch videos, and I will hopefully see you in the next video.